first question says, what covenant did God make with Solomon? Solomon had built the temple, and God's glory dwelled in the temple, and the sacrifices were burned up on the altar. And later on, God spoke to Solomon as he did at Gibeon in Jerusalem. And what did he tell him about the covenant? Anybody? You want to add something, Larry? He told him he needed to be faithful, like serve God with all of his heart, like his father David had, and keep the commandments. He and his sons needed to keep the commandments of the Lord. God would be with that house. He would listen to the prayers that were offered there. But if they were disobedient, if they went after other gods, then he would remove his protection from the temple. The temple would be destroyed. So he makes a contract. This is he'll do everything Solomon asked about the temple if you'll be faithful, and his sons will be faithful. But if they're unfaithful, then God's not going to be associated there anymore. So we're given a kind of a warning of what's to come later in the book when they begin to depart from God's ways. In question 9, it says, why did Solomon give Hiram 20 cities of Galilee? So it was sort of a payment. Evidently, he didn't have the money to pay all of it back yet at that time, and he gave him those 20 cities, and they weren't very good cities, and Hiram didn't even want them in the end. He didn't consider that a right payment. Kind of showed some stinginess there on Solomon's part. 10, it says, what can we learn about Solomon's administration from his building programs? Rebuilt cities all over the country, and storage cities and palaces. What's the result of those things? If we get a big spending government's going to rebuild everything. What follows? You're going to pay taxes, right? I mean, that's going to be. He's very active, very activist, in building up everything, but at the same time, it can take a lot of taxes and overhead to administer all of those things that he builds. How was the labor provided for all of that? Verses 20 through 23. Forced labor from the Canaanites that still lived in the land, that they were forced into labor to build these things. Israelites oversaw those people. What was the purpose of Solomon's navy? Trade and going to get gold out of the Far East and out of Africa, and brought great wealth into the country. We're going to see some more of that in the next chapter. Yes, Andrew. He's very, I mean, God said that he would make him great, make him wealthier and wiser and so forth than any king. And we see all of that demonstrated in chapter 9. And in chapter 10, his glory is shown even more. And of course, he is the greatest of all the kings of Israel when it comes to wealth and the power and size of the kingdom and all the trade and influence that Israel had. But it's very short-lived because he doesn't stay faithful to God in the end of his life. As a result, all of this is going to disappear. But Shows how much God can bless you if you put Him first. But once He gets pushed out of first place and you start worshiping other things, you can lose it just as fast. Of course, history's full of that story. I mean, if you watch biography shows about famous people, or a lot of times they're riding high, they got all the money in the world, and then they're broke and filing bankruptcy, and everything falls apart. It doesn't take very long for all that to happen. And at the end, he's going to have adversaries all around, and his son is going to lose almost the whole kingdom. It's going to be gone. But here we're at the height of his power, and the writer of First Kings lets us see just how powerful and influential and how all of God's word was fulfilled regarding Solomon as far as his greatness was concerned and his fame among all the kings of the earth, that there was just nobody like Solomon in all the world at that time. People wanted to come from all around the world to see Solomon and hear his wisdom and see the glory of his kingdom. Now, when the Queen of Sheba heard about the fame of Solomon concerning the name of the Lord, she came to test him with difficult questions. So she came to Jerusalem with a very large retinue, with camels carrying spices and very much gold and precious stones. And when she came to Solomon, she spoke with him about all that was in her heart. And Solomon answered all her questions. Nothing was hidden from the king, which he did not explain to her. So the fame has gone all the way down to, let's see, it's not showing the same slide I'm on here. I'm on 28. Back one. So if you look at this map up here, you've got Sheba located down here on the southern part of Arabia on the Red Sea, and right close to the Indian Ocean, just across from East Africa, and it'll be the southern part of Egypt. Almost Ethiopia is down that area, and so that's where some think the Queen of Sheba was located. It's where Yemen is at today. I think there's other maps that show Sheba going up this way and around, where we think of as Yemen. That's in the news a lot today because of the ISIS is operating there, and there's been a lot of we lost one of our special forces people there in that area a few weeks ago. They had a big raid and got a lot of equipment, a lot of information off of hard drives and things that they captured. But anyway, that same part of the world was thought to be where the Queen of Sheba came from, and then came all of that way up to see Solomon up in Israel, way to the north. And you think about all of the different questions you might have in all different kind of areas, and you want to test the person to see, are they really as smart as you say everybody says they are? And he answers everything that's in your heart. You can't come up with a question that stumps him. That shows something about the wisdom that he had and the breadth of it, that he, I guess whether it was math or politics or nature or morals or whatever it was that you would ask him, he had he was an encyclopedia of knowledge at that time. So he's able to answer all of her questions. So thoroughly passes the test. And of course, in all of these things, we ought to remember that when Jesus Christ comes, there's one greater than Solomon. All of the treasures of wisdom and knowledge are in Jesus Christ. He's God with us. Solomon, as great as he is, in comparison with all other men, is nothing in comparison with the Son of God. So there's one much greater that we serve. But Solomon is impressive. When the Queen of Sheba perceived all the wisdom of Solomon, the house that he had built, still not on the same slide here, isn't it? Okay, maybe we're linked up, I hope. So when the Queen of Sheba perceived all the wisdom of Solomon, the house that he had built, the food of his table, the seating of his servants, the attendance of his waiters, and their attire, his cupbearers, and his stairway by which he went up to the house of the Lord, there was no more spirit in her. So she's just dumbfounded, overwhelmed with the quality and the numbers and the design of everything that Solomon has made. Just, I mean, I try to think about somebody that impressive to anyone, that you're just dumbfounded. You don't even know what to say. You don't have any spirit left in you. All of their way that they conduct all of the ceremony and all of the clothes that they wear and everything that they do in service to him and the type of houses and the whole layout of his palace and everything is just a marvel to behold. Then in 6 and 7 says, Then she said to the king, It was a true report which I heard in my own land about your words and your wisdom. Nevertheless, I did not believe the reports until I came and my eyes have seen it. And behold, the half was not told me. You exceed in wisdom and prosperity the reports which I heard. A lot of times, people tell you about how great a place is to go visit, or how wonderful a country is if you could just go there, or they brag on somebody maybe about their hospitality and their goodness, and then you meet them and they don't quite live up to it. But that's so with Solomon. She says that not to have it. You're twice even the stories that I heard about how wise you are and how rich you are. There's no disappointment there. It's way more than what you expect. There's I think all of us at one time or another have had something built up to us, and you get there and you're kind of like, this isn't near what it was cracked up to be. But it's nice to show up somewhere and it be twice as good as you ever thought, right? What a deal that she could say about Solomon. How blessed are your men! How blessed are these your servants who stand before you continually and hear your wisdom. Blessed be the Lord your God, who delighted in you to set you on the throne of Israel, because the Lord loved Israel forever. Therefore, he made you king to do justice and righteousness. So she is so impressed with him that she realizes this truly is a divine blessing that the son of David has been raised up and seated on the throne. And she recognizes that the story is that God blessed him and gave him all of these things, and that all of that is truly from God. And she uses the name Lord or Jehovah to talk about God. And some people say she was converted to God, the true religion of God. Of course, if you want to make a movie, you'd exaggerate all of this into something, but it doesn't say anything about her giving gifts to God or worshiping God. She may have been doing what lots of foreign people did at that time. They recognized gods over all different countries, and the God that's over Israel, he's great, and he did a lot of great things for you. That doesn't necessarily mean that she was converted to Jehovah is the one God that we should serve. But she certainly recognizes that there's a great king on the throne that God has provided and blessed, and how wonderful it is just to be a servant and to be able to stand before Solomon. I mean, somebody that is spewing the greatest wisdom in the world, that people are coming from 1,000 miles away to hear what he's got to say. What would it be to be the waiter that gets to stand there and listen all the time to this wisdom that's falling from his lips? How wonderful is that? And then I think about David, how he would just like to be, a pillar in the temple of God, or just wants to be, the lowliest servant, like the prodigal son. If I could just be my father's servant, that would be great, because he's so good. Even to his servants, it's better than being over in that far country. And here we are in the church, and Jesus Christ, we get to listen to his words. And I think I can say, can't you, that no matter what you thought about Christ when you obeyed the gospel, that the half was not told about how great it is to be a Christian. I mean, it is so much greater than you understand when you're first baptized. be a Christian. That all of these things you could say about Solomon, even more so you could say about Christ. Everything about him, just to be able to listen to the wisdom that the Son of God has brought to the world, study what he has to say. What a blessing to be one of his servants. The gifts are exchanged between these rulers. It shows something about the great wealth of Sheba and also of Solomon's kingdom. And she gave to the king 120 talents of gold and a very great amount of spices and precious stones. Never again did such an abundance of spices come in as that which the queen of Sheba gave King Solomon. I think about what kind of a caravan must have came to town with all the camels and everything to bring all of this stuff with her as gifts to the king. And it's pointed out a lot by those scholars, and you read different commentaries and things, some of the political reasons behind these kind of things. Not just, I want to come here, Solomon, but if he is the greatest trader in the sense of you want to make money, Solomon's in the middle of everything. All of the trade routes go through Israel, to Egypt, and to the Assyrians and Babylon, and to the Hittites to the north. Everything goes through Israel. So you'd want to be in really good relations with Solomon, right? So all of these gifts, if they give you good trade relations, it's all worth it, right? I mean, they just had all of those meetings over in Europe with all of the world leaders getting together and honoring each other and giving speeches about each other. And they're all interested in all the trade and stuff, right? Even today, what's going on. So a lot of these gifts, you think about, there's some personal motive in all of this too. And also the ships, in verse 11, and just showing what resulted in all this wealth that Solomon has, and also the ships of Hiram, which brought gold from Ophir, brought in from Ophir a very great number of almug trees and precious stones. And the king made of the almug trees supports for the house of the Lord and for the king's house, and also lyres and harps for the singers. Such almug trees have not come in again, nor have they been seen to this day. And King Solomon gave to the queen of Sheba all her desire which she requested, besides what he gave her according to his royal bounty. And then she turned and went to her own land together with her servants. So it mentions these almug trees. That is sandalwood tree is what, when you look it up in the dictionaries and try to figure out what kind of tree was being talked about that was so precious. Comes from India today. There's also forests that have been planted in Australia. It's a very difficult tree to grow, like in the United States, but it's got a red wood, and it's Aramaic wood that gives off a beautiful scent. I noticed on like Amazon, you can order different kinds of cosmetics and things that have this wood in it. It's a very fine wood that's wood that would be great for decorative, purposes that you'd want to build things out of. Evidently for musical instruments, it was something good to use. That's what they used for these instruments at the temple to worship God. And I have a picture there of one of these trees. I was reading about the demand for that wood even today, that India had like a ban on on selling the wood and so on for a certain period of years. I think in 2001, they started allowing the people to sell it again, and there's more demand for it around the world than they can grow. And you can only, harvest it every 30 to 50 years to get the tree big enough to where they can harvest it. And so it's still, the government decides when a tree gets cut down in India. For a while, you couldn't own it on private land, but then they let private people grow it, but you can't decide when to cut it down. The government's got to decide when it gets cut down and when it's sold. And it's a danger, of thieves coming and getting this sandalwood, because I think when it's 5 years old, it starts making the oil that people want from it, and the fragrances and things are there. So you can come out and your tree's gone. So it's a problem because of its great value even now. So in Solomon's day, said never did they have these trees, until then, and they never saw them again. They come all the way from the Far East. And the Queen of Sheba, of course, being there on the Indian Ocean, she would be able to have access to those trees. So a splendid blessing and things that in the kingdom of Israel that they'll never see again were in the days of Solomon. Some more indications of Solomon's glory and the amount of gold and riches that were in the kingdom of Israel at that time. Now, the weight of gold which came to Solomon in 1 year was 666 talents of gold. Where's the other place you read that number? Do you think there might be some connection? Maybe, I don't know. 666. That's the number of man and the beast, the one that persecutes the church and all in the book of Revelation. Here, this gold and all of this wealth, Solomon's heart's he's gonna get full of pride and forget about God, right? He turns away from God. It's sort of interesting that you're talking about all this wealth, and it's 666 talents of gold. And that's the yearly amount that came in. Some think, well, maybe that's the amount that came in that particular year that the Queen of Sheba was there. Besides that, from the traders and the wares of the merchants and all the kings of the Arabs and the governors of the country. So he's got people that are subject to his rule that David had conquered all the way around from the river Euphrates all the way to the river of Egypt. They're paying their taxes and their tribute that's coming into Solomon in gold. And then you have foreign countries that want to trade and pass through your country. You're getting a tax. Every caravan, everybody that comes through your land, he's getting money from all of these governors and kings in other countries. And King Solomon made 200 large shields of beaten gold. The large shields or bucklers that it talks about are the rectangular shields that you go out to battle with to protect yourself. And then he mentions a smaller shield, a round kind of shield, was also made of gold. He made 300 shields of beaten gold using 3 minas of gold on each shield. And the king put them in the house of the forest of Israel. Well, I guess that's the 200 of the large shields, 300 of the small shields. You can see the big shields, it took twice as much gold to put the gold on them as it did the smaller ones. They're ceremonial. They hang in the house of the forest of Lebanon. And whenever they had, I guess, the Queen of Sheba or any of these, leaders from around the world would come. And, at the White House, they have all of the military bands, and they have some of the bands that look like the people from, the Revolutionary War, and all these different ones to entertain the dignitaries when they come. Well, here the soldiers would be out. Their dress uniform would be gold shields that they would carry. It'd be pretty impressive. You can see where she would say the attire and everything is like nobody's. That everybody's got plated gold on things that they're wearing. So not brass, but gold. And all of this is laid up. Then it describes his throne. He had a throne like no one. I mean, you see the crown jewels over in England and the throne of the Queen of England that she sits on when she gets, but it was nothing compared to Solomon's throne, I don't think, when you hear the description of Solomon's versus even the Queen of England, what she sits on. It says, moreover, the king made a great throne of ivory and overlaid it with refined gold. All the ivory was gold, but at least, I guess the other parts that weren't ivory you cover with gold, the wooden parts. And that's impressive. And then there are 6 steps to the throne and a round top to the throne at its rear. And the arms on each side, so it's got arms to it. And 2 lions standing beside the arms. 12 lions were standing there on the 6 steps on the one side and on the other. Nothing like it was made for any other kingdom. They have these big lions next to his throne covered in gold. And then the 12 lions going up the 6 steps, I guess representing the tribes of Israel that he rules over. And artists have different ways of picturing, where those lions are standing or how they're represented. But never has there been a throne like that throne, and the type of gold and riches that were associated with it. But, I mean, what is that in comparison to sitting on the throne of God in heaven at God's right hand? And all of the glory that's pictured of the Lamb of God with the ruler of the universe, God the Father, in the book of Revelation, and Isaiah's picture of what God's throne is like with the seraphim and the cherubim and all of that going on, and having a train that goes all the way out the temple, that God has on or whatever. So it's a great thing to represent and foreshadow maybe the reign of Christ, but it doesn't measure up to the real thing of the glory of Christ in heaven and what he must be there. Then it looks at all of the gold that was used as far as the utensils. We hear about the wealth of different people and extravagance where they have gold fixtures, on their faucets in their bathroom or whatever. Well, Solomon, all of the things that he would drink out of were gold. All of Solomon's drinking vessels were of gold, and all the vessels of the house of the forest of Lebanon were of pure gold. None was of silver. It was not considered valuable in the days of Solomon. For the king had at sea the ships of Tarshish with the ships of Hiram. And once every 3 years, the ships of Tarshish came bringing gold and silver and ivory and apes and peacocks. So Tarshish is Spain. So we read about in the Gulf of Aqaba going down to Sheba and to Ophir and to India. He has a fleet down there. And now he has another fleet. This fleet's in the Mediterranean Sea. And it goes all the way out to Spain and to England. And it's bringing back all these raw materials from that end of the world. So it shows where all of this wealth is coming from. He's working together with the Phoenicians to bring in all of these riches. And these voyages are so long that it takes 3 years for the ships to go out and come back. I don't know, were they going down the coast of Africa somewhere or further up into northern Europe in order to get these valuable minerals and gold and silver? They bring all of these things back. And certainly when you think about the apes, and that sounds like North Africa somewhere that they would be bringing those in from, right? These different vessels there are ancient vessels. None of them are Solomon's. I think the ones over here on this side are from the Scythians that are up, in the, sort of the southern part of Russia, and between there and Iraq is where the Scythians were at. They've had gold vessels that have been dug up, and other vessels from the ancient times, like Solomon would have had, made out of gold or overlaid with gold. These great riches allowed him to also get into horse trading. And horses are expensive and chariots are expensive. The people in the Hittite kingdom in Cilicia, that's where Paul was from, Tarsus of Cilicia, in the southeastern part of Turkey today, was where the Hittites were, and they had many horses there. And down in Egypt, they made chariots. Well, Solomon's able to be right in the middle, so he has both chariots. He can sell the chariots to the people in the north, and he can sell the horses to the people in Egypt, and he can have lots of horses for himself. So it's another source of wealth that he has because of the situation of the kingdom. So King Solomon became greater than all the kings of the earth in riches and in wisdom. And all the earth was seeking the presence of Solomon to hear his wisdom, which God had put in his heart. And he brought every man his gift, articles of silver and gold and garments and weapons and spices and horses and mules, so much year by year. So every time he got these foreign visitors, they always came with gifts. And it went that way year by year that they were bringing all these precious gifts to Solomon. Now Solomon gathered chariots and horsemen, and he had 1,400 chariots and 12,000 horsemen, and he stationed them in chariot cities with the king in Jerusalem, and with the king in Jerusalem. So, most of Israel was mountains. The central part of Israel is mountains, not too good for chariots. Down on the coastal plain and where Megiddo is at, there's a valley there. To the north, where he's conquered the Syrians, he could use chariots up there. But God's law told him not to. Remember when we studied Deuteronomy 17? It tells you don't multiply wealth, don't multiply horses, don't multiply wives. It says those things. Solomon does every one of those. And it's going to lead to ruin. It all sounds good, materially speaking, but in the end, it's going to be his downfall that he does these things. David didn't have all those horses. He refused to have the horses. But Solomon, he's doing what all the other kings do. He's building up this horse trade, and very expensive, of course, to take care of all of that. And the king made silver as common as stones in Jerusalem. And he made cedars as plentiful as sycamore trees that are in the lowlands. Along the coastal, right above the coastal plain, there's the kind of the lowlands before you get to central Israel or Judah. And all along there, they grew sycamore trees. They said the amount of cedar that he brought in was like the sycamore trees that they were growing in his day. And used it in all of those buildings. So everything was to excess, above and beyond what anybody had ever seen. And then it tells about where he kept all of these things. So Solomon import of horses was from Egypt and Cu, and that's the word for Cilicia in Hebrew. And the king's merchants procured them from Cu, or for a price. It says a chariot was imported from Egypt for 600 shekels of silver, and a horse for 150. And by the same means, they exported them to all the kings of the Hittites and to the kings of Aramea. So they had quite a trade going in horses and chariots that were going on. So just every area, everything he touched turned to gold, I guess, that Solomon's involved in. He's got diversified sources of wealth. It's coming from everywhere. That's causing him to have this wealth. Here's a chart in one Bible handbook that kind of lists off all of these things we've been reading about. 12,000 horses, 4,000 stalls for the chariot horses, 666 talents of gold received per year, which is about 25 tons. 540 talents of gold from Ophir and Sheba, 20.5 tons of gold coming in from that kind of trade. This is mind-blowing stuff. 500 gold shields we read about. 2 different fleets that are, bringing in all of these luxuries. All of that gold, articles of pure gold to drink from. All of the revenue he's getting from all the trade and from all of the subject nations. Precious stones and spices, just unbelievable wealth. And then Solomon's transgressions and troubles in chapter 11. We're riding high, everything is gold, everything is great, but we started off, it was all about God in the beginning, building the temple. God was first. Then he's built his own house. Then he built up all of this other stuff for himself and for the country. It was all about material things. And God's gotten shoved out. Certainly a cautionary tale for everybody that if you can be as smart as Solomon and as close to God as Solomon and you can fall away, that's a warning to everybody, isn't it? Any of us can fall away. God gave him everything, and look what he did. He forgot God. His attachment to foreign women and idolatry is what brought a downfall to all of this glory. It says, now King Solomon loved many foreign women, along with the daughter of Pharaoh, Moabite, Ammonite, Edomite, Sidonian, and Hittite women from the nations, concerning which the Lord had said to the sons of Israel, you shall not associate with them, neither shall they associate with you, for they will surely turn your heart away after their gods. And Solomon held fast to these in love. He was clinging to these in love, where he should have been clinging to God in love, right? That's where he went wrong. Before it was all about God, serving God, being wise for God. And over time, he gradually started clinging to these women in love instead. And can't serve two masters, right? You got to have your number one priority figured out. You got to know who the master is. The master's got to be God. You can't serve God and mammon, and you can't love family more than you love God. All right? You're not worthy to be Christ's disciple if you do that. He's got to be first. There's no question. Because you got to hate father and mother and whatever. When it comes to who you're going to love the most, it's always got to be